Okay, so it's January 24th, 2018. As you can see here, Andre and I are trying to grow some more apple trees. So what I'm doing right now is I'm just getting them in the planter pots. I don't have a lot of light in my house, in terms of my house faces north, so, but we'll get them started. Hold on. Okay, so I'm putting them in the little planter pots. I just thought I'd talk for a few minutes here. I'm extremely tired, people. Right? When you're planting apple seeds, try and use unchlorinated water, especially when you get them into the little planter pot. Do you see? Do you see it there? From this point forward, water with unchlorinated water, because they don't like chlorinated water at this stage. They really don't. And they do better if you give them a little bit of sun. So a couple of these I can put on one windowsill that I have. But, you know, I have cats, right? So they're jumping all the time, you know. So it's not the ideal location, but the one little apple tree that we had really liked it there. So I'm going to try. I got a little smaller ones here. I'm going to try and put these ones there and see what happens. Hopefully they'll be ready. So, more than likely we'll be moving people into the house. Either maybe start tonight or tomorrow for sure. Right? I'm not sure how that's going to work yet. And so far we're at about 7. I think we're just going to stop at 7. Right? Everybody wants a home. That's what it is, people. They want a home. The women are nesting. Right? It's co-op. Men and women. The women are nesting. And one woman, I'll tell you this story. Very funny. Well, I don't know if it's funny, but just imagine if this was you. Okay, you're standing in a homeless shelter. You've been homeless for a while, right? This is a girl. She's a pretty girl, right? And she's, you know, you've been homeless for a while. And anyway, you're inside the shelter talking to your friend, right? And, you know, your life is looking bleak, and, you know, you're kind of stuck in a rut, and you're motivated, but you don't, you whatever, right? And then along comes this woman and starts talking to your friend. This is me talking to my daughter. Because I went yesterday, right? Because I've been going back every day, right? And I went looking for the people that I'm dealing with, but it just so happened I ran into my daughter. And I said to her, I said, look, you know, we need to get on with this house, right? Because my daughter gets a room, right? And I said, have you, you know, found your roommate yet? Right? Because she wants the biggest room. Right? And like, at first she wanted to move in a male friend, and I said, no, you know, should be female and whatever. And so anyway, I was kind of like bugging her, right? In terms of, have you found anybody yet? Like, where's this person, so-and-so? She said, oh, no. And then the girl that was standing with us, Sierra, said, well, this is Ashley, right? And I'm like, oh. And then Ashley goes, what? And I, well, da. Long story short, people, she ended up getting a room. Right? Now, whether she shares with my daughter or not, I don't know yet, right? Because there's other people, right? I mean, they'll work it out between themselves as to what's going on, right? And just imagine yourself, and then all of a sudden you find out you have a place to live. That's pretty amazing. She goes, is this real? I can't believe this is happening. Because it happened so sudden for her, right? And I said, yeah, it's real. It's as real as it can get. And then I'm spreading the rumor already, people, that I might be getting another house. I might be. Right? I mean, obviously you don't count your chickens before they're hatched, but there is a good possibility that another house might become available in the next month or two, if not sooner. I don't know. So I'm like preparing people already. Like, we might be getting another house. So don't worry, don't panic, don't relax, like don't get stressed out. Right? I'm trying to put the stem a little deeper, because if these apples were in the ground, I would think that their stems, and their stems are very, very sensitive. You have to be very careful with their stems. They don't like to be bent or anything. They die off. These things die off at this stage, die off very, very easy. So you have to be very gentle with them. So if the second house comes through, obviously we'll follow up on that. Everybody knows that we're building on programs right now. This is program development, right? So, after everybody gets in and settles down a little bit, we'll have a group meeting. And somebody suggested that what I'm trying to do is like form a strata. And that's another word for co-op. It's strata, co-op. And I said, yeah, that's kind of like what it is, right? So rents are still be determining. What's happening here is, as the numbers are filing in, the Ministry of Social Development and Housing they're already deducting X amount of dollars off of the rental portion of everybody's check. So, in other words, if you get $375 a month in total for your rental, in terms of your room, your hydro, your gas, and basic cable line and that type of thing, telephone, they give you a maximum of $375. But they take the total rent. I don't know how they factor in hydros, but they take the total rent, and then as the people start moving in, they calculate it on some schedule that they have, to the point where people are already having deductions off of that $375. That's what I'm starting to hear from the landlord. Oh, God, this camera. Hold on. Okay, I don't really have a lot of time today, so I'm just going to leave it there and just finish what I have to say. So, as I was saying, the government is already taking off of that $375. And what I've explained to my daughters and my kids, right? Or even Uncle John, because, when we first moved into this house in 2010, I had an available room, and I went out to the homeless shelter, and I I rented out the room to a young man that, long story short, while living at my house, was the longest time he had ever been out of jail. So anyway, he was getting his money, and back in those days, I guess Sierra was living with me and whatnot, and just with the number of people living in the house, Social Services turned around and started deducting money off of their checks too, in terms of the rental portion, which ultimately put the burden on myself and Uncle John to cover up the slack in terms of when you have people in the house. The cost of living doesn't matter if it's dish soap, doesn't matter if it's laundry soap, doesn't matter if it's toilet paper, doesn't matter if it's bleach, doesn't matter if it's borrowing a cup of sugar. Sooner or later it all starts to add up, right? Maybe that person likes to use a lot of hydro, maybe they're using a base heater. There's too many variables in there, so that at the end of the day, this $375 that the government provides for shelter and hydros and whatever doesn't meet the actual cost of housing that person. The person that's renting to them takes on that burden. So now that the government, and it's been kind of, from what I can understand, that's what's already starting to happen, that leaves less money into the house to be able to do anything with, right? In terms of anything. So, I'm going to have to, I was telling my kids, I'm going to have to look up some of these. I'm going to have to look up more acts, people. That's what I'm going to have to do. I'm going to have to look up the Income Assistance Act and see if this is like specifically a provincial initiative where, you have 7 people living in the house and everybody is only now getting $302 for their rental portion. And that's supposed to include the hydro, the gas, any cable lines to the cable company, whether it's a landline telephone, because a lot of these people have no phone. So there needs to be a landline in terms of just a normal telephone, like, ring, one of these things, right? And, you have to have some kind of basic cable and, you have to have some kind of internet service, right? And then, of course, there's going to be days when you run out of toilet paper, and there's going to be days when you run out of dish soap, and there's going to be days of when you're going to run out of cleaning solutions, and just, so where does that come from? Where does that come from? To go room and board, the problem with going room and board, like I've considered it, I just don't want to have the responsibility of having to feed X amount of number of people every day, 3 full course meals a day, daily, cooked, served, and cleaned up after them. Right? Or even to go shop for that matter, because what one person will eat, another person won't. And, some people tend to eat more than others, and I'm not saying we shouldn't bring in any kind of like communal cooking from time to time, but I don't think it should be mandatory. And I don't want the responsibility of having to, I'm very hypersensitive, people, to like, like I've done a video in the past where, Mr. Noodle, they don't want no name Mr. Noodle. They want Mr. Noodle. Well, sometimes when I go shopping, I buy Mr. Noodle, and then there's other times I buy Mr. Noodle no name. Or I'll buy a Mr. Noodle of a different brand depending on the cost of the Mr. Noodle. It's not something that I rely on in terms of a food staple in the house, but the kids like it, and from time to time when I come across it at 27 cents a pack, then it's economical for me to buy it, but not at $1.49. Right? Whether it's no name or not, it doesn't matter. I wouldn't buy it. But you can see that, just as there's a Sherlock Holmes in every crowd, there's also a complainer in every crowd. Right? When one leaves, another one comes in. Auntie Joan was a huge complainer. Right? So, anyway, like I said, we may end up going into maybe, like, I have to talk to the group. That's what it is. I have to see what their vulnerabilities are. I have to see what their, I don't know if that's blurry or not, because I don't really have my glasses on. I have to see what their capabilities are, what their strong points are, what their weak points are, what they're interested in, what or what they want to develop, in terms of, like, some of them are young, so maybe they'd like to go back to school or something like that, and, and just have to connect with them, right? And then, obviously we need food security. In any house, you need food security. So how we build in that food security, I don't know yet. Leave it as a random free-for-all. Somebody's hungry, somebody comes in, they can smell something cooking, but who's cooking is not sharing because they bought it for themselves. So you see, initially I was charging $500 per person. I'm going to do charts on this stuff, people, because this is program development. And I've already told my kids that if I come into too much conflict in terms of, if anybody, I don't care who it is, but I guess you could say mainly the provincial government, if they expect me to take on the financial burden of assisting, right, vulnerable peoples with trying to bring in stability into their life, and so that they can have a productive future and whatnot, right? And but I'm expected to pay for it in terms of, well, you're only allowing X amount of dollars, that $302 for the rental share and the hydro, and when in fact the hydro is higher than that, when in fact the gas is higher than that. They can't factor in what the exact dollar amount is going to be in terms of hydro, right? And they're sure in the hell not factoring in toilet paper, dish soap, bleach, and those kind of things. Or what about a water hose? You know, we need a water hose, right? Who buys the water hose? Everybody's poor in that house. Nobody can afford to buy a water hose. But we need a water hose. So what, does that come from me? Right? Do you see where I'm going with that? So, I mean, food is a big one. So whether we go room and board, and then they figure out a system, because I'm not cooking it, right? And where everybody's just happy and satisfied with what they have versus, you know, it's a no-name versus a non-no-name, because it really depends on when you buy it and how much it costed at that time. And if you had anything extra to be able to stock up on it, right? As it is, they're not going to have anything extra to stock up on anything, so they're buying and living for the moment, right? Which is not a way to build in food security. So, I don't know. I'm standing here folding papers. So I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I have 6 little apple trees right now, and there's a few more in there. I want to plant them all because they all don't live. They all start to die off for some reason. But I'm going to give these ones more light. Hopefully they won't die off. Right? I think if I give them more light, they should be okay. So we're just going to leave it at that because I don't really know. I don't really know what's going on yet, right? I did find 2 measuring tapes, though. Isn't this nice? These are really nice. I'd like to keep them for myself because they're smooth. But, you know, in light of what's going on, I think I'm going to leave these on the kitchen counter for the men in that little teeny weeny happy house. Okay, you can see.